Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Animas Corporation, providing insulin delivery products for people living with diabetes and part of the Johnson & Johnson Diabetes Care Companies, and by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes with the world's first continuous glucose monitoring system that sends glucose readings directly to your compatible smart device. Live life on your own terms with Dexcom. Hi, it's Stacey. This podcast is not meant as medical advice. I'm not a doctor, and if you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, important information about Glucagon for emergency low blood sugar and the Glucagon kit we all should have and we all hope to never use. I'm talking with the people from Lilly about what we need to know.
That's where it gets tricky, right? When you're in an emergency situation and you have to put these items together and then administer it, you need some practice around that, right? So you can be successful. But we would love to have it where you don't have to do that mixing.
Julie Settles is the U.S. medical lead for Glucagon at Lilly. We'll also talk about what they're working on, a simpler method, sort of like a nasal spray, and good advice for using the injection until that's available. Plus, what can you do when a school or camp program says they won't give Glucagon to your child? One dad's story of how staying calm and educating can make a big difference.
You're asking them to do something new for your kid, right? You know, you're asking, make my kid the snowflake. And that's always a difficult ask. And like I said, I could not have been more impressed with the way the folks at Duke handled it.
James Wedding shares his family's experience with the Duke TIP academic summer program. Plus, a little bit about the Big Blue test. It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another week. I'm Stacey Sims. Glad to have you along. If you're new to the show, really glad you're here. So happy that you found us. The idea here at Diabetes Connections is that you will hear stories of connection that will educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes. I have a broadcasting background, many years in local TV news and radio news, and my son has type 1. Put them both together, and here you go. And I think this is an important show this week. Like many of you, I have that little red box. Some of you may have an orange box, different brands, that we keep around in case of an emergency. Glucagon. Some of you have had to use it. Others, like me, keep knocking on wood that we won't have to. But today we're going to learn a lot more about the ins and outs from the makers of the Lilly Glucagon kit. But first, quick word from our sponsor. We started using an Animas insulin pump 9 years ago. 9 years ago this past July that we started pumping with Animas. I love their products. Customer service is second to none. Animas offers a choice of insulin pumps, so you can choose the pump that best suits each individual, and in our case, families' unique needs. I love working with Animas. I am thrilled they are on board with this podcast. Find out more about their products at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Animas tab. This time of year, we see a lot of diabetes programs ramping up. Of course, November is Diabetes Month. And one of my favorites is the Big Blue test. And here to explain the Big Blue test is Mike Lawson from Diabetes Hands Foundation.
It's that time of year again. It's Big Blue test time. Each year, people all around the world experience firsthand how small steps can have a huge impact. Get out and get active for 14 to 20 minutes. If you have diabetes, check your glucose before and after. Then answer a few questions on bigbluetest.org or by using the iPhone or Android app. The average participant sees her blood glucose drop by almost 20% after only 14 minutes of exercise, proving that small changes can have a big impact on our health. But if that's not enough, for each Big Blue test entry received between now and November 14th, $3 will be donated to nonprofit organizations that are providing life-saving supplies, services, and education to people with diabetes in traditionally underserved communities. It's easy. Get up, get active, join the movement at bigbluetest.org.
Thanks, Mike. We actually have done the Big Blue test several times. In fact, I'll link up a video we made a few years ago of Benny's jump rope club when he was in 4th grade, I think. We had a whole bunch of kids do the Big Blue test, 2 of whom, Benny and a friend, had type 1 diabetes, and the rest did not. So it was a lot of fun to get them all involved. And more information at diabetes-connections.com about how you can get involved with the Big Blue test and learn more about this great program. This was one of the first social media campaigns I found years ago, so it has a special place in my heart. And I love the work of Diabetes Hands Foundation, so please go ahead and check it out. All right, and welcome to our newest sponsor. We are now brought to you, as you heard at the top of the show, by Dexcom. And 3 years ago, when Benny turned 9, we started using the Dexcom continuous glucose monitoring system. And the Dexcom CGM system really changed the way we looked at his type 1 diabetes. Being able to continually see and track glucose levels on a screen has been an amazing experience. I can't tell you how much easier it makes my job as a parent to spot trends, help my son avoid extreme highs and lows. The Dexcom G5 mobile CGM system is the first of its kind to help you monitor, track, and share glucose continuously and remotely from your compatible smart device so you can live life on your own terms. For more information, go to Dexcom.com. My guest this week is Julie Settles, the U.S. medical lead for Glucagon at Lilly. She's also an acute care nurse practitioner. She's also been an EMT and an emergency room nurse, and we'll talk more about that experience. Julie has type 2 diabetes. Her niece has type 1. This is a cause that is as personal to her as it is to many of us. So here's my talk about Glucagon and Lilly's emergency kit with Julie Settles. Julie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for the invite.
I want to have a discussion with you today. I want to talk about Glucagon because I think like many people who have someone with diabetes in their home or have diabetes, you get that little box, you know you need it for emergencies, but you kind of put it away or you kind of put it in your bag and hope you never have to take it out and don't maybe learn too much about it. Can we start with the basics? I mean, what is Glucagon? What is that kit all about?
Right. Well, I guess what's important to know is, first of all, glucagon is a hormone that is naturally occurring in your body. So it's created by the pancreas, but it primarily works on the liver. So if you think about glucagon, it's kind of like the yin to the yang of insulin. So with insulin, if your sugar is high, your insulin kicks in, and when your sugar is low, your glucagon is supposed to kick in. When your glucagon kicks in, what it does is it tells your liver to start producing more sugar to deliver to the bloodstream so your body can use it. What happens when people have diabetes and are taking insulin, sometimes they overshoot that, carbs, a miscalculation. Sometimes people will mix up their doses, and now you have all this additional insulin running around driving your blood sugar down. Your natural glucagon, if it's working properly, just isn't able to handle that overload, and so that's where the glucagon kit comes in. So people who are having severe hypoglycemia now give themselves glucagon, which is kind of like a uber bolus of glucagon, telling that liver to convert all its glycogen stores into glucose to go into the bloodstream so your body can use it. It's kind of like jumping your battery, I guess, a little bit. You have to give that big dose to kick it in to get that low blood sugar up.
And you know what? I should have started by asking about how the body produces it, because that is a great explanation. And is that, when people talk about, the liver dump or things like that, is that what they're talking about?
Exactly, yeah. So, when your glucagon is working in day-to-day activities, your blood sugar drops a little bit, your liver gives your glucagon tells your liver to give just a little bit of sugar. And so you kind of go up and down, just like it's supposed to tell you to give a little bit of insulin if your insulin's working fine. But now you're in a critical situation where your blood sugar is low, so you want that liver to dump as much of that glycogen into glucose or converting it into sugar as it can at one time.
Wow. So when the liver converts and converts the glycogen and tells your body to release, I can't even speak. When the liver does that, mm-hmm. Can it do it again quickly?
Yeah,
because my understanding is that it can't. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the glucagon kit, we do talk about how you can give a second dose. So it's one of those situations where hopefully it dumps it all the first time, what you have. And you got to remember, right, hopefully you have some glycogen to convert. So people who have been sick for a long, extended period of time, people who have ingested a lot of alcohol, sometimes that glycogen reserve isn't there anymore to use at all. For those people who do have it, sometimes on that first dose, and this doesn't happen very often, it doesn't dump all of it. So that's why after 15 minutes, if you haven't had a response for your glucagon, the instructions say you may give a second dose, and that's hoping to maybe dump out that last little bit that maybe didn't convert in that first dose.
Okay, so let's talk about the little red box.
Yeah.
What is in that kit? How does it work?
So in the little red box, where we have been with glucagon is that it came in a powder form, and you have the powder form that's in a little vial. Then you have a syringe that has a diluent in it, and when you need to do glucagon, you need to mix those two together, because the glucagon we've had, once you reconstitute it, so once you put that liquid into the powder, you have to use it right away. It starts to degrade after that. So that's where it gets tricky, right? When you're in an emergency situation and you have to put these items together and then administer it, you need some practice around that, right? So you can be successful. But we would love to have it where you don't have to do that mixing, but where we were at in the past is that you would have to mix it too before you could give it.
Well, before I ask a little bit more about practicing that and how to do it, it sounds just by the grammar you're using that maybe we are moving to more stable glucagon. Is that something that's on the drawing board?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where everybody's heading towards. And I'm sure you've probably heard that we have a nasal glucagon right around the corner, which we can talk about later if you want to. But yes, looking for a soluble glucagon that doesn't need reconstituted is also the same thing they're looking for when you're talking about closed loop systems, etc. So having a glucagon that lasts more than a few minutes after you reconstitute it, I think, is what everybody is seeking.
Yeah, and we will talk about those too a little bit later on today, because that's just fascinating. But so right now you have, and you know what, I'm going to grab a practice kit. So when I was at a conference recently, the Lilly folks gave me a glucagon demonstration kit for practice only. So I'm going to try to visually go through this with you, and we'll see if we can kind of explain it. And I'm sure you all have videos. We'll link that up at diabetes-connections.com. But how does this work? So I open up the kit, and you've got the vial on the left and the syringe on the right as I'm looking at it. What do? It's an emergency situation. I need to draw this up. What do I do?
Well, one of the things I guess I would say, a great tool that we have that actually demonstrates the steps is the Glucagon app, which kind of goes through. But what you need to do is, so you have your vial of glucagon powder, right, in one hand, and then you have your syringe with the liquid in it in the other, correct?
Yes. So I'm going to do that while you talk.
Okay.
With my practice, empty stuff. This is just a practice kit.
Yeah, see, you're even more prepared after today. So you need to take the cap off the powder, and then you're supposed to just wipe that off just to make sure it's clean, because who knows how long you've had your glucagon kit in your backpack, right? Then you take the cap off the syringe to inject the your pretend diluent there into the powder. So you put the needle through the top of the vial. You're going to inject all that fluid all the way in, and then you need to pull that needle out, and you're going to swirl the container until it becomes clear. And I always tell people, don't shake it, you want to swirl it.
That's what I was just going to ask. Swirl, don't shake.
Yep. And it does work better.
The opposite of James Bond. You want stir, right, not shake.
Exactly. So, and it does make a difference. It will dissolve a lot faster if you swirl it than if you shake it up.
Is it dangerous to shake it up? Is it a question of bubbles or something, or is it just a better way to dissolve it?
No, it's just a better way to dissolve it.
Great, because I'm telling you, we've been very fortunate. We haven't had to use this, and in my experience, knowing me, I would be very happy to just remember, and I have the app on my phone. We'll talk more about the app later, to remember how to do it. And I'm glad to hear that a misstep like shaking isn't going to mess it up too much.
Oh no,
because I'd be in full panic mode.
Right. And we know
Okay,
it's an incredibly stressful situation.
Yeah. So I interrupted. So we've got my solution all swirled up.
Yep.
Then what?
Now you're going to put that syringe with the needle back in, and you're going to draw up all that liquid that's inside the vial. So you've done that step?
Yes.
Now comes the fun part. So first of all, you need to decide, are you administering it to somebody who's over 44 pounds or under 44 pounds? If it's somebody over 44 pounds, you'll do the entire amount. For people who are under 44 pounds, it's just half that dose. But we recognize that sometimes in a stressful situation, somebody may accidentally give the entire dose, even if they're under 44 pounds and you're only supposed to have half. And what I want to say is, that's not something you should totally freak out about, because like we said earlier, you can give a second dose 15 minutes later. So if you happen to give both those doses at once, it doesn't end up being too big of a problem. So the recommended dose is half, but don't freak out if you accidentally give more for somebody under 44 pounds.
This is intramuscular, right? This is
Correct.
Muscle?
Yes.
Right.
So we actually, you are able to give glucagon intramuscular, so into the muscle. You can give it under the skin like you do insulin, and you can give it IV, but it works a lot faster if you give it IM. And the kit is set up to deliver it as a intramuscular or in the muscle injection. That's why the needle's big. That
is a big needle. The kit that I'm using, this white teaching kit, do you make those available? Are they available for educators, or can anybody kind of call up or write in and get one?
Yep, so they are available for both. We've been giving them to educators actually for a while, and then I think you shared with me earlier that you'd been at Friends for Life.
Yes.
After we saw what a big hit those were, we are making those available for the general public as well. And to get those, you call 1-800-LILY-RX.
Great. That's great. And I'll link that up at diabetes-connections.com, because I took a handful, and everyone I've given them to, a school nurse, other parents, has just been thrilled, because we are all, as you know, we're so nervous about using it. And, once you have an expired kit, which is what many of us practice on, you can only practice once.
Right.
So with this one, you can go through it again and again, and it just kind of helps. But do you know, are you able to track if people use it properly? I mean, have you studied? Because I have got to imagine, and I know myself, it doesn't sound like you can actually mess it up too badly. There are little steps you can mess up. But do people make mistakes as they go through?
So, we have if somebody reports a problem, we do have a system where people can call in and we follow up on those cases. But, we hear more and more stories of successes. We have people all the time who say, oh my gosh, it's amazing. I gave the glucagon kit and I was so scared to do it. And when I saw, my child wake up and stuff, it was kind of like they became a hero in that moment. So we put a lot of, like we were talking about before, whether you give it IM or whether you give it under the skin or whether it's all going to work. It just, might be a couple minutes longer depending on how you deliver it. But otherwise, the kit works. It takes some practice, I agree, and that's why, having the training kit, doing what you're doing, practicing with your expired kits is fantastic. But, like we're going to talk later, trying to find a way that we don't have to reconstitute is, what we've been striving for. Yeah. That's the hardest part, right? Because you're used to giving shots and stuff. It's the...
it's the prep. It's
right.
Just the prep to worry about that. It looks different than anything we use. But I'm really glad to hear that, because that's my biggest concern is if I stay calm enough, and I get through it. It sounds like okay, it's going to work out all right. Are there any areas of the body that are just off limits to do this in? I can't imagine someone's going to do it in a wrong place. But I guess what I'm asking is, can you mess it up if you do it in the arm or in a place that's, it doesn't sound like you can.
Well, so there are three places that you're supposed to be giving it. So that's in the thigh, the arm, or the buttocks. So I think those are probably the places that most people think about giving a shot anyway. But that's what, we studied. We know it works in those areas, so those are the recommended places. And again, IM is the route that the kit is designed for the way to administer it, and it works the fastest that way.
Great. When should you, before I ask that one, can you give it through clothing? And I know it's probably not recommended, but will it work if somebody has a roommate who's got pants on and they don't want to, will it work that way?
Yeah, we've never studied that. And I know that there's articles and stuff about that, but yeah, we've not studied it with our kit, so it's hard to comment on how well that would work.
When should you not give a glucagon shot? Can you talk about maybe some instances where it's not recommended?
Well, so the kit is obviously designed only for severe hypoglycemia. So patients with diabetes having severe hypoglycemia. So you don't want to give it to somebody whose sugar is high and experience hyperglycemia. If somebody can, it's not severe, somebody can eat or drink on their own. So that's obviously always going to be the best route to take, right? And then there's a couple weird instances that are pretty rare, but I thought I'd tell you. So somebody who has pheochromocytoma is not supposed to ever use glucagon. And then somebody who has insulinoma is supposed to use glucagon cautiously.
Are those conditions that the person with them knows? I mean, I don't recognize either one of those.
Yeah, most of the time they do. But, if you have somebody who has a low blood sugar and they have type 1 diabetes, I mean, the thing to do is give them glucagon unless for some reason they have those other problems.
Got it. Can you speak to... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then obviously if you're allergic to something in glucagon, you shouldn't take glucagon.
How do you know? Is that something that people know who have allergies? Is that something that's tested for?
Yeah, exactly. So talk to your healthcare provider about these things. If your healthcare provider is giving you a glucagon kit or recommending a glucagon kit, then you should be using a glucagon kit if you get severe hypo.
Okay, so people with the allergies, their healthcare practitioners should not be recommending this.
Correct.
Okay. One of the things that I've heard a lot about in the last 2 years that I didn't hear about when we entered this world almost a decade ago is a mini glucagon or mini dose glucagon rescue. Can you speak to that at all? This is the same kit, but some practitioners have come up with a way to use very small doses for either little kids or older kids who aren't in need of the emergency. Is that something you can speak to?
No, unfortunately I can't because it's not approved on our product label. But I know there is a lot of research being conducted around this, and the discussions are very interesting. All I can say is, especially from our previous discussions, is that once you reconstitute that you have to use it right away. You can't use it the next day. So, mini dosing is something that we're not doing with our kit right now.
Got it. I will link up some of that research at diabetes-connections.com, but it is good to know, and I did not realize that it was not labeled. So it's good to know, and it's the kind of thing that as you listen, once you read that research, please talk to your healthcare provider before doing anything like that. And Julie, I'm just curious. As I said earlier, I have not, thankfully, ever had to give a glucagon shot. We've had some scary lows with my son, but he's always been able to eat or drink. But we do train with the expired stuff every year, and now with the teaching kit. Have you ever personally had to do that, either in a clinical setting or personally?
So I have not given the emergency glucagon kit, and there's a couple reasons why. Once, when I started off as a EMTs are not allowed to give glucagon. Then as a nurse in the emergency room, and then even as a acute care nurse practitioner, we start an IV and give glucose through the IV. Fortunately, I have not had to actually give a glucagon shot to somebody who's hypoglycemic in an emergency, situation like out at the mall or something like that. But I think it is interesting that, and I think it sounded like you weren't aware of that either, but, a lot of people's plan is to not get glucagon and just call 911 which we still
That's
want
exactly
you to
what I was
call.
going to ask
Yeah,
you
so
about.
Yeah, we still want you to call. You have additional medical help coming. But it's important to know that often the first responder who gets there, even though it may take, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, which seems really fast for somebody to get there, they then have to wait for a higher level of care, like a paramedic to come, before they're able to treat your severe hypoglycemia.
So as an EMT, what if anything can you do? You can't even start a glucose IV?
Nope. No, you cannot. So what you do is you do an assessment and you'll say, we still need so the paramedic often will be en route because, you call for an unconscious patient, you call for a person with diabetes, and so they know that when the EMT gets there, they're not going to be able to do very much. But now you have an additional response time before that second person who it does have the skill set to treat severe hypoglycemia is able to get there. So again, during that time frame, the best thing you can do for somebody who's having a severe hypoglycemic incident is administer glucagon.
Wow, that's great to know. I had no idea. I'm knocking on wood. I'm knocking on everything I can find that we haven't had to do that in these 10 years. But very good to know. And Julie, let's talk about the glucagon. You've mentioned a couple of times that we're all hoping, and lots of people are working on a stable formula for this. Anything you can tell us about the research, or anything you can tell us about the challenges?
So, wow, there's so much in this area, right? There's the quest for stable, soluble glucagon for closed-loop systems so that people can carry it around in their pump, right, and give those doses more physiologically, like we talked about earlier. And then there's intranasal glucagon that we just acquired the rights from Leucemia on in October of 2015. That powder it's a dry powder that can be delivered. It's single use. It's a ready-to-use device, so there's no reconstitution, and it's delivered simply by inserting it into one of your nostrils, one of their nostrils, because it's for a caregiver or friends or family, and then pushing the plunger on the bottom, which administers the dose.
This is what I'm very excited about. This has been called leucemia, as you said, and we describe it in layman's terms. We say the nasal spray, the glucagon nasal spray. I know it's a little bit more complicated than that. Can you tell us anything about studies on it? I know talking about when things get approved is really just, not something that you can give us a time frame, but is there any information out there right now on how well it works?
So, I really can't say that much because it's not being FDA approved, but, we're currently in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're working really hard to ensure the submission is supported by a robust clinical package. And obviously, if it didn't work, then the FDA would not approve it, right? So, but we're progressing forward to that event and be able
in a
to
phase 3.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. A phase 3 clinical trial. Remind me, this is maybe the last one before submission?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I took a couple of questions from the Beyond Type 1 app. They have a great mobile app. This is a wonderful organization that helps people with type 1 kind of find each other and do a lot of cool stuff. And I did have a question about the nasal glucagon. Sten wanted to know, will it last longer than 18 months outside the fridge? I don't know why that specific time period, but you mentioned it was stable. Does it last for a long time too?
So that's a good question. So that's something that we can't really answer right now. We are working on reliable manufacturing in the supply line, and then those questions will be answered after that's being completed.
Okay. As you study it now, though, does it have to be refrigerated or anything like that, or is it just something that you can keep like we keep the kits?
Yeah, you'll be able to keep it in your pocket.
Great. How big is it? I'm thinking whenever we talk about it, I always think of like an Afrin, the brand name nasal spray. I know it's more of a plunger, but that's the size I think of. Is that about it?
Yeah, you'll be able to carry it in your pocket. It'll be
that's great.
Smaller than the kit that is currently available.
Okay. And then we talked briefly about possibilities for the more stable glucagon that I know that Ed Damiano in the Bionic Pancreas, he's trying to put out a 2-chambered pump. It would be insulin and glucagon, so he's one of the projects working toward that. Another question on Beyond Type 1 was really similar to that question, or really speaks to that question, which was Jenna. Jenna wanted to know if they can make an all-in-one glucagon injection. When we talk about the not having to swirl it around, is that what you're talking about with stable glucagon? Would it still be an injection?
I really can't comment on that because I'm not familiar with what their actual goals is of their research. So we're just really focusing right now, and my area of expertise is more around the nasal glucagon that we have coming.
Great. Okay. So let's talk about I mentioned the Beyond Type 1 app, where I got those questions. Yep. Let's talk about your app, because I have had this on my phone. I opened it when I first loaded it to put the information in, haven't gone back because I don't feel like I, thankfully, have not needed it. But what's here? And should I be checking in more often?
Yeah, so, like we've spoken about several times, is that, you are required to give glucagon during probably one of the most stressful moments of your life, right? So it's for a friend, your child, a loved one. So the way to work through a stressful situation is by practicing, right? So it's great you guys are using your expired kit. That's a great way to use expired kits. But if you think about it, how much practice is that, right? Once a year, once every 18 months to you, depending, So the app, besides the fact that it tracks your expiration dates, it'll tell you where you have some of your kits, right? So your expiration date of the one you have at school that you're not looking at, the one you have at the grandparents' house, right? So those are some practical things, but I think the most valuable part of this is it has a virtual simulator where you can practice the injection steps. So first there's a tutorial, and then the steps actually have you rub the top of the vial, swab it with an alcohol, inject the diluent, swirl, and you actually get to move your phone around to swirl. So it actually gives you some virtual practice that you can do, once a week if you want to, every day when you first get that glucagon kit to help build some confidence, and some of those steps just come second nature to you then when you practice them. In addition, another cool thing about this is that in an emergency situation, you can actually have it play the steps and speak out loud to do those steps. So it actually instructs you.
I'm going through it now under practice and prepare. And this is so cool because you have to kind of go step by step. As you said, you swipe on the phone, you swirl the phone. That's really fascinating. And I'm sorry I haven't gone through it earlier. When you have the directions, as you said, is that under watch a tutorial?
Correct.
Okay. Great. And I will make sure that you can get to the app right from diabetes-connections.com. And it really is very handy. I went in it when I opened it, but to go through it again, I think periodically is a really great idea. And as you said, you can practice whenever you want. You can sit in carpool and
oh my gosh,
and go through it.
Carpool line. And then it's available for iPhone. And the first year it was only available there, but it is available now on Google Play for Android.
Excellent.
So if people tried to get it when it first came out and they had an Android, well, we got one for the Android people now as well.
Very nice.
I think the other thing is, and you were probably in the same boat, which is, 40% of severe hypoglycemic incidents happen outside the home. So, you may think you have it down, but how about that other person that has access to the kit, right? So if you have it at a grandparent's house or, a split home where it's at one house or the other, if they have this app on there, I think it gives the person who has diabetes or their child has diabetes a little bit of help in helping other people know how to use glucagon.
That's fantastic, especially the part where it will talk you through the process.
Right, exactly.
That's really great. Was there anything else that you wanted to be sure to mention before I continue with a couple of little things?
So, one of the things is, who should have a glucagon kit? And I think that, more and more people are managing people's diabetes, and I think that sometimes people have a lot of stuff going on when they first get diagnosed or over time. So, and then people try to self-predict if they're going to have hypoglycemia. With over 20 years of experience in healthcare, with a lot of those being in the emergency room, I've seen a lot of the devastating consequences of people who underestimated severe hypoglycemia or thought it would never happen to them. So any person with diabetes who's on insulin should really consider having a glucagon kit readily available.
Can I ask you about your ER experience, only to get some advice? God forbid somebody has to go to the ER. What can we do now when we're not in an emergency situation to better prepare for when we may be? Are there one or two things that you'd like people to know?
So like you're arriving as a family member or a person with diabetes?
Can you talk to both? I mean, let's start with the family member of a child, perhaps, or someone who's helping a person, an adult with diabetes.
Yeah, so I think the biggest gap when people go to the emergency room is that they think that the emergency room has all their medical records at their fingertips, right? So they're like, well, I come to this hospital, or my endocrinologist is at the hospital. Why don't you have that information? So you really need to have how much medicine a person's on, and not just their diabetes medicine, but any other medications that they're taking. It's important to come, and it's a stressful situation, but knowing what might have gone wrong. So there's a big difference in how we treat somebody knowing, oh my gosh, I took my medicine and wasn't able to eat, versus I've never had a low, I have no idea what's going on, everything was fine, right? So that kind of changes what the treatment plan may be, whether you go home that day or whether you spend the night. But it's a stressful situation for you as well. So having medication dosing written down, your endocrinologist or your regular diabetologist name and phone number written down will really expedite care when you get to the emergency room.
And what about if you are the person? I mean, if you're brought in, that can be a very difficult situation, I'm sure, and you may not have things prepared.
Oh my gosh, I cannot emphasize enough that people have got to wear something that says they have diabetes. We have this teenage boys, get them some the dog tags that have it on there with information. There's a lot of services now where they can put it on an armband around their necklace that has contact information, or a central hub where people can call in and get information, something in their wallet, something in their purse. But you have to be able to communicate with healthcare providers. And like I say, you don't know where severe hypoglycemia may occur. So it could happen, not where you're on vacation. It could happen at the mall, and you may not be going to the facility where people know you. And like I said, even if they do know you, it takes time to get that information.
That's wonderful information. Thank you so much for that. Before I let you go, though, any advice on storing the kits? Is there any bad place to store them? Any issues we should look out for?
Yeah, so although we want you to have glucagon everywhere you go, like keeping it in your glove box is going to get too hot. So heat is kind of the enemy of any medicine, actually. So, it's better to keep it in I know a lot of people have their diabetes pack, like a little bag or something with their supplies and stuff in it, but that's something that you're going to take with you every place you go, but also not leave them places where things are going to get too hot where there's potential for them freezing.
Right. And you don't need to refrigerate, right? I know it says the temperature right on the box.
Correct.
Okay. And Julie, you actually have a personal connection to diabetes. You have type 2 yourself, and you have a niece with type 1. What is it like to work in the field and be touched by diabetes this way?
Well, I mean, it's pretty amazing. I got type 2 diabetes when I was pregnant, and then everybody promised me that it would go away after I had my daughter, but it did not, despite all of my efforts. So here it's amazing because you see how hard everybody here is working to find solutions for patient type 1 and type 2. So, when I was outside the walls of Lilly, I'm like, they're doing their thing, making their meds. And then when you're inside the walls, I mean, people are working night and day here for people, and we have a wall here of how people are connected to diabetes, and everybody has a story here about how it's a parent, a loved one, themselves, who have been touched by this horrible disease, diabetes. So it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like there's new stuff around the corner all the time.
How's your niece doing?
Fantastic. She is had twins, so
oh wow,
it's not really my little niece anymore. Had twins, which was a challenge. Is doing great. I mean, she's always like texting me her A1C and being like, see, my A1C is awesome. So yeah, she's doing great.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for joining me and for explaining so much about something that many of us have, but don't even want to take a second look at because we're nervous about. So I really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
And thank you so much for the invitation. I love talking about this, and I'm passionate about the success stories behind Glucagon, so I really appreciate it.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Much more on Glucagon, information from Lilly, how to get one of those teaching kits at diabetes-connections.com. And I'll link up more information on the mini Glucagon shot that we talked about. As Julie said, Lilly cannot really give out information on that. I don't know if that would be classified as an off-label use, which is usually something your doctor would prescribe, but a few hospitals have put out guidelines on how to use that. And I do think it's useful information, so I will link it up as well. I'll tell you, I was really happy to go through the app, and it just made me feel a little bit more comfortable about that red kit. Although, gosh, we get them renewed. We always make sure they're up to date, and my school nurse has one, and we have one. But, if we think that kit looks daunting, how about people who don't deal with diabetes every day? Sometimes, have you been in this situation? They just say no, they won't use it. But a lot of times that's because they just don't understand it. And I want to bring you this community connection because I think it's a great example about how sometimes change isn't as hard as we think it's going to be. And sometimes pushing for change for our child can help many, many others. You may know James Wedding as the president of the Night Scout Foundation. But here, James is talking to me just as Carson's dad. She was accepted into an academic summer program, the Duke TIP program, which is really a great program and very academically advanced. It's a big honor, but it meant 3 weeks away from home. And the program initially said they could not ask their staff members to use Glucagon if needed in an emergency. So here's the whole story with James Wedding.
Tell me about the program that your daughter was accepted into this summer to start with.
So Duke runs a program called TIP, the Talent Identification Program, for 7th graders who take the ACT or SAT, and then based on the scores, they offer them the opportunity to go attend classes at colleges around the country.
Had she ever done anything like that before?
Of course not. She's diabetic. No, of course, and she's just now in 8th grade, right? So it was something brand new, and she was really excited to see the information packet. And of course, Duke is pretty smart. I mean, they're a good school, so they send the kids one information packet with pictures of all the kids having fun and playing around all these very cool university campus, and then they send the parents another information packet with bills. It's absolutely great marketing. They get the kids really excited, and then the parents see the bill later and go, oh, my kid's already excited, and this looks great. But my brother was a Duke student, is a Duke alumnus, so like, yeah, let's figure out a way to make this happen.
Well, it's also a wonderful academic program. It really is a well-known honor for these kids to go. But what was your first reaction? Because you already said, she's a diabetic. What was your first reaction?
Well, the first reaction is it's 3 weeks. It is away from home. It is not a camp for kids with diabetes. It's a different experience. It's absolutely a test of your self-care skills. And while she is brilliant and graceful, that's a big step for all of us. And we all have to do it. But it's just such an absolute gut check to see if we can figure out how to make it happen.
So what did happen when you decided, all right, we're going to go through with this? You guys hit what would seem to be a pretty significant hiccup. Can you explain why you felt that you needed to kind of get involved further?
Sure. Duke offers accommodations. I mean, it's ADA and all those sorts of things. You fill out your paperwork, you send in your 504 plan, and they email her right back and say, yes, here are these things. And then we sort of followed up and said, well, what about Glucagon? And the initial response, like in so many cases, is we don't do injections. And immediately we start spinning up. That's what we do as type 1 parents. And then we had to think about, okay, is this really going to be the thing that stops our daughter from going to a camp that she's already excited about and we've already sort of committed to making happen? So the big change was I said, instead of doing this through email, why don't I just actually call this person? And it was amazingly simple, and the people at Duke were absolutely great. So I picked up the phone and called the coordinator and said, hey, I know we've traded a bunch of emails. You've already sent us a decision that you won't do. I said, but have you ever actually seen a glucagon pen? Well, no. And I said, can I just send you a video real quick? And we just sent them the Lilly Glucagon YouTube video, 3.5 minutes. And I said, look, take a look at this video. It's very similar to the EpiPens that you're already training your staff and resident assistants to use. Take a look at this and call me back. And 2 hours later, she called back and said, oh, that's simple. We'll make that happen. We'll take care of your daughter. No problem. We're going to figure out a way to get our staff trained. No problem. And it was just one of those cases where tone and spun up type 1 parents, it was so easy to make a phone call, and it worked out great. And they were so accommodating, and they were so helpful. And they went to the point where they said, now we're going to add that to our training for all staff at all the camps. So it was really exciting to see a program look at it and say, hey, this is another way where we can include more kids, we can make them safe, we can bring them out to this great program and give the parents some peace of mind.
Were you surprised when you called that it not that it was that simple, but that it wasn't more difficult?
A little bit, right? I mean, you're asking somebody to spend some money. You're asking them to spend some resources that are probably already stretched. And you're asking them to do something new for your kid, right? You're asking, make my kid the snowflake. And that's always a difficult ask. And like I said, I could not have been more impressed with the way the folks at Duke handled it.
How did your daughter enjoy the program?
She loved it. Let's say she survived. It's how Melinda and I describe it. She got to go be a kid. She went through camp. She survived. We had a few things that we dealt with, but text and phone and email and life goes on, and she had a great time at camp, and she's already trying to figure out how she's going to go back.
Oh, there's the mark of success. That's fantastic.
It was great. She had a great time. And again, folks at Duke were absolutely wonderful.
I will link up more information about that, the video that James is talking about. I'll make sure to link that up at diabetes-connections.com, because sometimes it is as simple as pointing out how simple these things can be. Sometimes it's not, I get it, but when it works, it's going to help so many other kids. I just last week, the information about the Duke Tip program for Benny. Now, he's only in 6th grade, so it's a different program, but he'll be eligible for one that Carson, that James' daughter, went to. He'll be eligible for that next summer. And thanks to this action, I know that if he goes to the Duke Tip program, they will be trained in administering glucagon thanks to James. How cool is that? This is such a small world. All right, before I let you go, as usual, please make sure you're following us on social media. You're already following us on Facebook and Twitter, right? And you subscribe to the podcast, right? I mean, if you're listening on Facebook or through the website, that is great. Whatever makes it easy for you. But if you want to make it even easier and you have a cell phone, go ahead and subscribe on whatever podcast app makes sense. If you have an iPhone, it's going to be the Purple Podcast app that's somewhere in your phone. It's one that comes with the phone. If you're listening on Android or you want to listen on Android, I would recommend iHeartRadio, Google Play, or Stitcher. As usual, lots of choices in Android, but it doesn't have to be confusing. If you have any questions, reach out, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. Lots of great stuff to come, fun events, and lots of travel for me this fall. I'll keep you up to date on that, but I will be in LA Halloween weekend, the JDRF walkout there on the 30th of October. I will be in Naples at the beginning of December for a JDRF walk there, and I will be in Greenville, South Carolina for a retreat for JDRF. Lots of JDRF events coming up in January. Oh, and we're going to go as a family to Riding on Insulin, the skiing and snowboard event. I will link up Riding on Insulin as well. I'll sneak that in here to this episode because I don't know when registration closes for that. We have never skied or snowboarded, so it's going to be a hoot. But the kids are really excited about it, and I know that Riding on Insulin is a great program. All right, so hope to see you at one of those. Let me know if you want me to come to your town. Reach out. We'll do an event. We'll have a lot of fun, and we'll podcast about it. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.